Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Afternoon Rush Nation, we are back. We are back with the waiver wire. This feels like it's the most important waiver wire of the season. So let's not waste any time with the preamble. We've got 3 weeks of the fantasy season. Let's get straight into it. And probably one of the biggest waiver wire ads going through and starting at the running back position is Emmanuel Wilson. He's going to be one of my top priority ads this week. We've seen the Packers and how they like to utilize a single back. Josh Jacobs has got that injury due to a high work rate and an unfortunate incident that happened with him on Sunday. And Emmanuel Wilson came in and he outplayed Chris Brooks quite significantly. It was 39-5. And Wilson got every single carry. So we know that Wilson is going to be the guy. And this could be seen as a 1 week play. This could be seen as something that maybe is a little bit longer, because at the end of the day, whilst the reports say it's not season ending, it could potentially be week to week, and he could be out for 2, 3, 4 games. And that's something to keep an eye on, especially with how short the fantasy season is now. So I would be going in pretty hard on Wilson. I'd be spending, at least $10 a fab, if not more. I'd be spending quite a significant part of my fab budget to go and get him in, especially with the schedule of Minnesota, Detroit, and Chicago. It's not amazing, but it's also a pretty good one to go and target. So I do like that to go and target over the next few weeks and feel like it's a good opportunity to go out there. The next one's Byshore Tootin. Byshore Tootin is owned still in a considerable amount, 30% of leagues. He's been held pretty much since the start of the season. That ownership was well over 50%. And then what we saw was week 11, he came out early and he was playing a significant amount of the snaps. But you look at the carries, it was 15-12. And ETN was sort of coming back into the game before the injury to Tootin, and then ETN scooped up sort of the end points, the end carries to really make over. But 15 carries, 74 yards. Now you're going to see and read a lot of fantasy reports over the next sort of day or so, if you haven't already, that Byshore Tootin is like the must-add player of the week, and I'm more skeptical. I think there was a game plan by Liam Cohen and the Chargers to run the ball a lot at the Chargers, or the Jaguars at the Chargers, and I think that they will have utilized that as a game plan. I think it was game script specific, which is why Tootin got a lot of carries. Now, he was very good in that role. Look at their fixtures coming up in the next few weeks. Arizona is a game plan that might not be as successful. Tennessee will be fine. He'll get a high workload there, and then Indianapolis. But I think 2 of the next 3 games, I do think they will struggle to run the football as much as they did do against the Chargers. So I am a little bit hesitant to say that he is a great fantasy ad. I think he's a good fantasy ad. I would definitely try and acquire him in leagues, but I'm not as convinced on some that he's the league winner. Now, I can be wrong. I definitely have been wrong many times. But I am less inclined to go as hard on Tootin as I am on Wilson. Also, Tootin did get injured in this game, as I've said. He could be out a couple of... it seems like he's fine, but he could miss Sunday. And then how much longer do you really get to utilize him? We've got to remember that Tootin's sort of best case scenario here, he's a 50-50 back with Travis Etienne, who has carried the water all season. And he could get more role in the fantasy playoffs as a result of ETN doing a lot of the carrying, but I don't see it. I just think there was a reason it happened this week. People saying, oh, well, it was due. He was a highly touted back, and it was something that we thought we would see earlier in the season, and yet everyone picked him up late in drafts. And I think it's just like this confirmation bias of why everyone wanted him and why everyone picked him up. It's like, oh, it's happened. The thing we expected to happen has happened. But why did it happen now? If it came out of the bye, I would like week 9, I would have gone like, yep, timescales work, got to the bye, they're competitive. They've worked out what they want to do with the new coach and everything going through. Week 11 is just, it would appear to be random. And then I looked at the game script and I looked at where they wanted to really do damage. And you look at all the wide receiver injuries in this team as well. I don't feel this was random. I feel like this was a pre-designed game plan from Liam Cohen. And I feel like this was something that was executed for this game in mind. And I think that the injuries sort of are forced to hand Travis Hunter. But I think if Brian Thomas is back, they don't run the ball as much. Parker Washington didn't get a lot of didn't get a lot of play in this game. Trevor Lawrence didn't throw the ball a ton in this game either. I think all of those elements suggest to me that this was game script design. So just a little bit lower on Tootin than everybody else, but still worthy of an ad. Still worth $5 for sure. But I do think there are other options I would probably be looking to lean in on ahead of time. I would look at, say, a couple of other players who I think could be significant ads. One is Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell has got, he's 32% owned. And we now know with Jaylen Warren being injured, Gainwell can do the job. And more importantly, we've seen what he does in the receiving game. That's really important. For example, we've already seen Kenneth Gainwell reach a 20% target share or more in 3 games this season. And so we're looking at what we're seeing with Gainwell, and we've seen the productivity we're getting in the passing game out of the back. I think he's a flex-worthy play with Warren. I think he's a running back 1 upwards. Like, I think he's top 15, top 12, top 10 at the position if he gets the whole load. So Kenneth Gainwell to me is someone that's probably a little bit more intriguing of an ad. So for me, I'd be spending sort of between $5 and $8, maybe even as high as 10 on Kenneth Gainwell. The worry is that if Jaylen Warren is okay, I mean, it's an ankle injury. So, do we see Kenneth Gainwell in the next game? I don't really know. That's kind of a lot of precariousness, and that is going to cap his upside quite significantly. But I'm quite intrigued into the sample size that we've seen so far this season out of Gainwell, that he could be productive even with Jaylen Warren there. But if Jaylen Warren sort of gets reduced, then I definitely look at this and go that Gainwell is going to get a significant role, at least for next week, if not more. So I like adding him into my teams a little bit more this week than the likes of Tootin. And then the other one is Sean Tucker, a player I've talked about so many times. One of my favorite late season throws, and he scores 3 touchdowns. He goes off. What I'm looking at here is, and I was surprised that Rachaad White got as much play as he did. I talked about it when Bucky Irving got injured, that Sean Tucker was the guy I would own because I think he's the more explosive. He didn't prevail until now, but what I would say is this. They've got the Rams this week, one of the, if not the toughest running back matchup on the board. Arizona, not necessarily much easier after that before they get the Saints. We know that Bucky Irving is going to come back at some point, but I would expect he could probably miss another week. And if that happens, then Sean Tucker will probably carry the load next week. But I don't think this matchup is particularly great for the Bucs or for the running game here. So, for me, Sean Tucker would go immediately into, shorter than RB20, probably somewhere in the region like RB25 for the week. I'll have to sort of do the matchups and analysis to get into it. So, yeah, I'm not overly confident there that Sean Tucker is going to be a big explosive guy, and that we've probably already seen his best week. But still someone that you should be adding in leagues. And make people be honest, I'd throw a bit of $2-3 out there. If someone wants to go $10 and go box score chasing, then it's fine. But keep them honest, there's a bargain to be had there. Bam night is now. Is it Bam night? Is it Emery DeMarcado? Then DeMarcado gets injured. Bam night then comes back and he's sort of catching the ball. 4 catches. But what I would say with this is, if DeMarcado is out and Benson is out, then Knight all of a sudden holds some value. But the schedule's terrible. Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, and the Rams. You're not getting RB1 production out of Bam Knight. You're probably not even getting RB2 production out of Bam Knight the next couple of weeks, even if it's a sole role or a majority back role. So if you're desperate over the next few weeks and you need running back cover, you've lost a load, then Bam Knight is one that's going to have a fixed role over the next couple of weeks that you can pretty much depend on. The problem with that is with the schedule that he's got, with the versus the talent he has, it's not going to be huge. So, you might get 10 points out of him with PPR, you might get 12. And that's kind of how you got to think of it, is if that's good enough for your RB2 spot, then great. But the likes of Wilson, Tucker, Gainwell, even Tootin to a degree probably have higher upsides than him. And another guy who's probably going to have as much of an outcome is Rodriguez, but he is on bye this week, Chris Rodriguez. But he is really starting to we're starting to see Chris Rodriguez take more and more of the backfield. And he's had over 150 rushing yards in the last 3 weeks, and he's continued to get more and more work. So Chris Rodriguez is worth an add for sure. And a player that I'd be looking to add in more leagues, especially deeper leagues. In shallower leagues, maybe not. And they're on bye this week, but they do have a pretty good end of season schedule. Giants in week 15, and then they've also got the Cowboys in week 17. So there's a good time to get in there and make the most out of him. So I'd be looking at that with him and going from there. I've just looked at my phone to see Aaron Rodgers' news that he doesn't need surgery. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the running backs. If you want to get some sort of stash guys, Algier is still out there. That's a player I'd be looking to acquire a little bit, have a bit of exposure to. Jaleel McLaughlin, no one's going to pick him up this week with the bye for Denver, but he could be an interesting add. RG Harvey isn't absolutely blowing the doors off, so there could be room for Jaleel McLaughlin, and he did get the touchdown. So he is someone that's worth an add. If you can afford to stash for a week, you can probably get him for $1 right now. Plus Brian Robinson Jr., Blake Corum, Ollie Gordon, all these guys need to be owned as well. Let's talk about some wide receivers here. There's quite a few to talk about. Alec Pierce is still continuing to do Alec Pierce things. 3 top 24 finishes in the last 4 weeks, or in the last 5 weeks, because he had a bye last week. He is really producing good numbers according to Fantasy Points. 28% target share and a 32%, almost 33% first read share. So he is absolutely crushing it right now. Good schedule coming up. If Alec Pierce is on your waiver wires, and it's only going to be about half of leagues, Alec Pierce is worth throwing some big bucks at. Probably my number one ad in all positions this week for sure. Christian Watson is another one with this with this wide receiver field being heavily destroyed, and now with Aaron Jones, with Josh Jacobs going down, Christian Watson's getting targeted a lot. He's got a huge ADOT, and I basically look at Watson as, people forget he was a former first round pick, elite talent. Unfortunately, just stuck with injuries. But I do think that he is one of the more competent wide receivers in this team. With no Jaden Reed out, there isn't another receiver in this group with his set of skills. I fully expect him to really get utilized, and they've got some big shootout games over the next couple of weeks, and they're going to rely on Christian Watson. So I wouldn't mind adding him in a few more leagues if he's out there. Everyone's talking about Michael Wilson after his huge game with Jacoby Brissett last week. Obviously, a lot of that is due to the fact that Marvin Harrison was out due to appendectomy. I think with Brissett, you're starting to see more volume and you're starting to get more passing volume. And as a result, I think there's probably a bit more of an appetite to Michael Wilson's role than there would be normally. So I would be adding Michael Wilson for sure. I think he's worth having now. There's more passing volume. They've got more competency at the passing position. Jacoby Brissett, by the way, how good has he been over the last few weeks. Mac Hollins is a guy I talked about last week. He's a guy I talked about this week with no Keyshawn Booty out. Mac Hollins is going to continue to have a role and a flex-worthy role. So I'm really pleased to see that he's going to have a great opportunity this week, and also against the Giants. The next 2 weeks, great matchups for him to be targeting and to have really good utilization. So I would be looking at Mac Hollins as a 2-week push before his bye week to get some additional points. Jaden Higgins continues to tick over, and he is getting more and more usage. The route share is a bit of concern. It is under 50%. That is a concern. But he is starting to see an uptick in all other areas in terms of air yard share, target share. He's one of these that he is becoming a fantasy candidate, but he's not there yet. So if you want to get ahead of the curve, Jaden Higgins is a player that I would be looking to add this week for sure, because I think he's going to give you, maybe in the fantasy playoffs, some flex-worthy performances. So I'd be looking to stash Higgins. I think he's going to be a good add for you. Another player very, very similar minded to that is Tyler Lockett. We're seeing what he can do with his target share and route share, that it's stepping up immediately. And we've already got a sample size with Geno, with Pete Carroll, that we know that he's going to be a flex option in PPR leagues. He's going to have that opportunity to continue to put up, half decent flex-worthy performances. So another player in a deep league you should be interested in. Darnell Mooney becomes an immediate focus for fantasy folks after the injury for Drake London. He is out this week with a PCL sprain, and he's probably going to be out week 13 too. Those matchups he's missing is the Saints and the Jets. Two good opportunities here for Darnell Mooney to score big. But the problem with that is he has, despite in those games where Drake London has been out, he's had a 26% target share. He's had a 37% air yard share. He's had a near 30% first read share. The problem is he's done nothing with that. He doesn't even manage a yard per route run. He's not managing more than 26, 27 yards on average. And he is going to need a lot of volume to be fantasy relevant. Against the Saints, I can see that volume coming. Against the Jets, maybe harder so, because you can run the ball on the Jets to victory, especially with Bijan. So I look at the Saints as probably a nicer matchup. The Jets could be a half-decent matchup. But if the Jets aren't scoring points and they've already benched Justin Fields, and Bijan kind of takes the game away from the Jets on his own, which is possible, then you are looking at that. Plus, you've got the change of quarterback. You've got Kirk Cousins coming in. How long does he need to be acclimatized? He's already looked pretty terrible this season. There is some risk to Darnell Mooney, but there's some significant upside in taking the gamble. But it will be a gamble. He is 31% owned. He's only owned in 31% of leagues. So he's a gamble, but the upside of taking him is massive. So buyer beware, but you never know. It could come well and come out nicely for you. Parker Washington still available in over half the leagues. I do think, again, I said this, that game script kind of conspired against him last week, so I was fine with the dink in week 11. I do think it will be better for him moving forward. But if Brian Thomas comes back, that'll be the end of Parker Washington. So you've probably got a 1-week window, maybe a 2-week window to make the most out of him. I'm still of the opinion that Luther Burden is going to play a lot into this season's fantasy playoffs. And I've been talking about him for a while. He is still someone that I think is going to emerge as someone who is going to have a significant fantasy game in the playoffs. It's just, we've seen it at last that he's passed Zacchaeus in the Bears official depth chart. He's getting very close, according to PFF, to having a 20% target share. It's not quite there, but it is starting to happen. If you watch the game with the Bears on Sunday, Burden is out there more. He's running more routes. He is starting to emerge as a potential threat for this offense. So I'm really starting to see that there is an opportunity for Burden. I don't think it's going to be like a 90% role because a lot of the 12 and 21 personnel that they play, but I do think that there is an opportunity for him, and I think it will come out soon enough. So yeah, I really like Luther Burden. I've talked about him many times already. I'm going to find something that I read earlier, which was let me see if I can find it. It was from JJ Zacharyson. This is what JJ Zacharyson wrote in his piece, just to quote one of the great ones. He wrote this: 61% route participation rate, 22 routes to Zacchaeus' 7. Burden also had an 18% target share, which was another season high. But he had him on his rookie ZAP model. He says, in fact, no one on Chicago is really close to his awesome 2.39 yards per route run. I'll say it again, even if it doesn't work out in 2025, this is the exact type of player you want stashed this time of year. And now he's getting more playing time. It's even more obvious. So you don't have to take it from me. JJ Zacharyson is as high, if not higher, than I am on him. So one I would be looking at for sure to stash away. So keep adding him everywhere you can. Let's move on to quarterbacks. Jacoby Brissett, wax lyrical of him about how good he has been. 47 completions in week 11. What a guy. Absolutely brilliant. Just absolutely balling. 452 yards with that passing attack that had no Marvin Harrison. It was great. So, yeah, he's someone that you've got to be adding. He's probably the number one ad right now. If not him, then you're going to be looking at, say, someone like Trevor Lawrence, but I wouldn't be spending fab on him. You could probably get him for free. And then we've got those tight ends. Keep an eye on Juwan Johnson. He had been dropped in a lot of leagues last week to make way for players. So he will be around. Tyler Shook is utilizing Juwan Johnson a lot more. So just keep an eye, make sure he's there because he's still free in about 55% of leagues. But he is putting up good points with this new quarterback. If he's not available, have a look at the likes of Dalton Schultz or Corsten Loveland, because they will definitely be ones that will be utilizing him. But again, they're owned in almost half the leagues. So then we switch to some of the outside ones. Mason Taylor got heavily dropped, but with Tyrod Taylor back in the fold, we know that there's going to be more passing, higher volume, and Mason Taylor with no Garrett Wilson is probably going to be the biggest beneficiary of that. And they've got Baltimore, which is not a matchup you should be scared of. I'd be adding Mason Taylor as someone if you're definitely looking for them. Noah Fant as well is continuing to get some utilization. We'll see what happens with Joe Burrow this week, because I do think that will fall away. But mind you, having said that, with no Jamar Chase due to the spitting this week, we could see a decent opportunity for Noah Fant against New England. That is not a matchup to be feared from a tight end perspective. And then looking at the DSTs, there's a few you could absolutely target over the next few weeks. The 49ers, 18% owned, have Carolina and Cleveland. That's a good one to go after. I've talked about the Browns quite a bit. They've got Vegas, San Francisco, and Tennessee. That's a pretty good set to go after. The Raiders themselves have a pretty good schedule. Obviously, how bad they are with Cleveland, the Chargers, who are well off form, and Denver, who again aren't scoring much offensively. So they're ones that you can target. Or the Jaguars with Arizona and Tennessee, then Indianapolis are other ones that you could target. And if you are desperate for a kicker, Evan McPherson's probably your best guy. If you can't find him, then Borregales is another one, or Cam Little. They're the guys you need to definitely own. And they're definitely ones that are going to help you out over the next few weeks. You'll no doubt have some injuries and players you need to drop. This is definitely a good week to go and spend a good significant amount of that fab. So go and make the most of it. Good luck getting those players. We will see you this week for the flagship show, and we'll help you steer some W's in week 12. But until then, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.